There I was, sprawled across the cold kitchen tile, my broken legs screaming in agony, while my daughter-in-law Sarah towered over me with pure hatred blazing in her eyes. She had just kicked my crutch clear across the room and shoved me to the ground, shrieking that I was faking my injury for attention. My heart hammered against my ribs as I stared up at this woman my son had married, finally seeing her true nature. The little red light on the security camera in the corner blinked silently, recording every cruel word, every vicious action. I knew then that Sarah was capable of something truly evil, and I had to find a way to protect myself before she tried something far worse. My name is Faye Morrison, and 6 months before that terrible day in the kitchen, I thought I was the luckiest mother-in-law alive. My beloved husband Robert had passed away after a 43-year marriage, leaving me alone in our suburban Ohio home for the first time in decades. The grief felt overwhelming, like drowning in an ocean of memories and silence. That's when my son David stepped in with what seemed like the perfect solution. At 38, he had always been thoughtful and caring, just like his father. He suggested I move in with him and his wife Sarah to help with my loneliness and share household expenses. Sarah, who worked as a dental hygienist, seemed genuinely supportive of the idea. During our first conversations about the arrangement, Sarah wrapped her arms around me and spoke with such apparent sincerity. "We want you to feel like this is your home too, Faye," she said, her voice warm and reassuring. "You shouldn't have to go through this grief all alone." I felt such relief and gratitude. Here was a daughter-in-law who truly cared about my well-being. David worked as a mechanical engineer at the local manufacturing plant, putting in long hours, so Sarah would be wonderful company during the days. I sold my house within 2 months and moved into their guest bedroom, bringing my most cherished belongings and Robert's favorite armchair. Those first few weeks felt like a blessing. Sarah would make me coffee in the mornings and ask about my plans for the day. She seemed interested in my stories about Robert and our early years of marriage. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to shift. I started noticing little things that didn't quite sit right. When David wasn't around, Sarah's warm smiles would fade faster than they appeared. She'd roll her eyes when I asked simple questions or make small comments under her breath about elderly people needing constant supervision. One evening, I overheard them arguing through the thin walls about money. Sarah's voice carried sharp frustration as she complained about credit card bills and spa treatments she couldn't afford. When I offered to contribute more from my Social Security and Robert's pension to help ease their financial strain, Sarah's reaction seemed almost too enthusiastic. "That would be incredibly helpful," she said, but something in her eyes made me uncomfortable. It was like watching someone calculate numbers in their head. Then I began noticing Sarah's spending habits more closely. Designer handbags appeared regularly, expensive skincare products lined the bathroom counter, and she scheduled weekly spa appointments while simultaneously lamenting their tight budget. The contradiction bothered me, but I tried to push away my doubts. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning when I found Sarah at the kitchen counter, methodically opening and reading through my mail. Bank statements, insurance paperwork, and correspondence from Robert's pension fund were spread across the surface, like she was conducting some kind of financial audit. "Sarah, what are you doing with my mail?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm despite the shock flooding through me. She didn't even look embarrassed. Instead, she straightened up with an expression of defensive irritation. "I was helping organize your finances, Faye. You've seemed so scattered lately, and I thought I could help you keep track of important documents." "I never asked for help with my finances," I replied, my voice firmer now, "and I haven't been scattered about anything." Sarah's facade cracked for just a moment, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. "Well, perhaps you don't realize how much you've been struggling with these kinds of tasks. David and I have both noticed you seem confused about money matters lately." That was a complete lie, and we both knew it. I had managed my own finances perfectly well for 67 years, including handling Robert's medical expenses and insurance claims during his final illness. The accusation felt like a slap across my face. As I gathered my mail from the counter, Sarah's mask slipped back into place, but I had seen enough. This woman who I thought cared about my well-being was studying my financial situation like a predator sizing up prey, The realization hit me like ice water in my veins. For the first time since Robert's death, I felt truly afraid. Over the following months, Sarah's behavior became increasingly troubling, though she was careful to maintain her caring act whenever David was present. When my son was at work, however, her true personality emerged like a venomous snake shedding its skin. She began making cutting remarks about my age and usefulness around the house. "I hope I'm not still shuffling around being a burden when I'm your age," she'd say with a laugh that held no warmth. When I tried to help with household chores, she'd critique everything I did. "That's not how we fold towels in this house, Faye. Maybe you should just rest instead." One afternoon, I caught her going through my jewelry box in my bedroom. She claimed she was cleaning and organizing my things, but I noticed her examining each piece with particular interest in my wedding ring and the pearl necklace Robert had given me for our 25th anniversary. Sarah also began scheduling errands and activities during times when David would be at work, effectively isolating me from my son. When he'd ask about our day over dinner, Sarah would describe elaborate outings we'd supposedly taken together. "Your mom and I had such a wonderful time at the farmer's market," she'd lie smoothly while I sat there knowing we'd spent the day at home. More disturbing was how she started manipulating situations to make me appear incompetent in front of David. She'd ask me to fetch something from the basement, then find it in an obvious location upstairs, shaking her head sadly. "I think Mom might be getting a bit forgetful," she'd whisper to David, loud enough for me to overhear. During one of these manufactured incidents, I discovered something that made my blood run cold. While looking for my reading glasses, which Sarah claimed I'd misplaced again, I found her laptop open on the kitchen counter. The browser history showed searches for elder care facilities in Ohio and signs of dementia in elderly women. But what truly terrified me was finding a notebook hidden in the kitchen drawer filled with Sarah's handwriting. Page after page documented my supposed episodes of confusion, memory problems, and erratic behavior. All completely fabricated, but written with the methodical precision of someone building a legal case. I started keeping my own journal, hidden inside an old cookbook in my bedroom, documenting Sarah's actual behavior. I wrote down every cruel comment, every manipulation, every lie she told David about my supposed mental decline. Meanwhile, I began piecing together Sarah's financial situation. Phone calls I overheard revealed gambling debts from online poker games. Credit card companies called constantly, and Sarah would take these calls in hushed, desperate tones behind closed doors. One evening, she cornered me in the kitchen while David worked late. Her voice carried a new edge of desperation as she pressed me to add her name to my bank accounts for emergencies. "What if something happens to you and David can't access your funds to pay for your care?" she argued. "It would be so much easier if I could help manage your finances." I refused firmly, and for the first time, Sarah dropped her pretense entirely, her face twisted with undisguised anger. "You stubborn old woman," she hissed. "Do you think you're going to live forever? Someone needs to make practical decisions for you." The transformation was shocking. Gone was any trace of the caring daughter-in-law. In her place stood someone calculating and dangerous, someone who viewed me as an obstacle to whatever scheme she was planning. That night, I heard her on the phone with someone, discussing what it takes to have someone declared mentally incompetent and how long the process usually takes. The words chilled me to the bone. I realized Sarah wasn't just trying to steal my money. She was systematically working to have me declared incompetent so she could gain complete control over my finances. And David, working long hours and trusting his wife completely, remained oblivious to the web of deception being spun around both of us. The most heartbreaking part was watching my son's genuine concern for my well-being being manipulated and weaponized against me. Every lie Sarah told him about my supposed confusion was another nail in the coffin of my independence. I knew I had to find a way to expose her before she succeeded in her plan. But first, I needed proof that David would believe, because Sarah had already begun poisoning him against anything I might say in my own defense. As winter settled over Ohio, I became increasingly cautious around Sarah, trying to protect myself while gathering evidence of her manipulation. She seemed to sense my wariness and escalated her psychological warfare accordingly. Sarah began moving my belongings and claiming I had misplaced them. My favorite coffee mug would disappear from the kitchen cabinet, only to be found by Sarah in my bedroom dresser drawer. Important documents would vanish from my filing system and reappear in random locations throughout the house. "I found your insurance papers in the refrigerator, Mom," David would say with worried eyes. "Are you feeling all right?" The gaslighting was methodical and relentless. Sarah was creating a pattern of evidence that would support her claims about my mental deterioration. The morning of my accident, Sarah had mopped the wooden staircase leading to the second floor. I needed to retrieve a sweater from my room and carefully made my way up the stairs, holding the banister firmly. On my way back down, my foot slipped on the still wet wood. The fall was devastating. I tumbled down 8 steps, my left leg twisting beneath me with a sickening crack that echoed through the house. The pain was unlike anything I'd ever experienced, radiating through my body in waves that made me nauseous and dizzy. Sarah appeared at the top of the stairs within seconds, but instead of rushing to help, she stood there for a long moment just watching me writhe in agony at the bottom. When she finally called 911, her voice carried perfect concern and distress. "My mother-in-law has fallen down the stairs," she told the dispatcher. "I think her leg might be broken. Please hurry." By the time the paramedics arrived, Sarah had transformed into the picture of a devoted caregiver. She rode with me in the ambulance, holding my hand and making soothing sounds while I fought against waves of pain. At the hospital, X-rays revealed that my left leg was broken in 2 places, requiring immediate surgery. Dr. Patricia Walsh, an orthopedic surgeon with kind eyes and steady hands, explained the severity of my injuries while David paced the waiting room. "Your mother will need pins and plates to stabilize the fractures," Dr. Walsh told David and Sarah. "The recovery process will be lengthy, and she'll require significant care and physical therapy." Sarah immediately volunteered to be my primary caregiver, which David gratefully accepted. "I don't know what we'd do without you," he told his wife, kissing her forehead with genuine appreciation. During my week-long hospital stay, Sarah visited daily, bringing flowers and playing the concerned daughter-in-law flawlessly for the medical staff. But once we were alone in my room, her demeanor shifted completely. "This is actually perfect timing," she whispered one afternoon, when David had left to get coffee. "Now everyone can see how fragile and dependent you really are." When I came home with a cast, prescription pain medications, and instructions for limited mobility, Sarah took control of my care with frightening efficiency. She managed my medication schedule, prepared my meals, and controlled who could visit me during my recovery. But something sinister was happening with my medications. The pills Sarah gave me looked different from what I'd received at the hospital, and the dosages seemed wrong. Instead of feeling better as the days passed, I became increasingly weak and disoriented. My thoughts felt foggy and disconnected. Sometimes I'd forget what I was saying mid-sentence or lose track of entire conversations. The confusion was terrifying, made worse by Sarah's constant commentary about my episodes. "David, I'm really worried about your mother," I'd hear her say during his lunch break calls. "She seems so confused lately. This morning she couldn't remember taking her medication, and yesterday she asked me the same question 5 times. When David would gently question me about these incidents, my medication-induced confusion made me seem unreliable and disoriented. I'd try to explain that Sarah was giving me the wrong pills, but my words came out jumbled and incoherent. "Mom, you're not making much sense," David would say with genuine concern. "Maybe we should have Dr. Walsh evaluate your mental state along with your physical recovery." Sarah would nod sadly, playing her role perfectly. "I've been thinking the same thing. The fall might have affected her more than we realized." One night, desperate to clear my head, I stopped taking the medications Sarah gave me and only took the actual pain pills from my original prescription bottles. Within 2 days, my mental clarity began returning, confirming my suspicions about what Sarah had been doing to me. She had been deliberately giving me incorrect medications to create symptoms of dementia and mental decline. The realization was absolutely horrifying. But the most devastating discovery came when I overheard Sarah video calling David at work during one of my medication-induced confused states. She was showing him my disorientation and using it as evidence of my declining mental capacity. "See how she can't even remember what day it is?" Sarah said into her phone camera while I struggled to answer her questions through my drugged haze. "I think we need to seriously consider what's best for her long-term care. Sarah wasn't just poisoning me. She was documenting my artificial decline to build a case for my incompetence. Every confused moment, every medication-induced episode was being recorded and presented to my son as proof that I needed to be placed in professional care. The trap had been set with diabolical precision, and I was running out of time to escape it. David left early Tuesday morning for a 3-day business trip to Indiana, kissing both Sarah and me goodbye before loading his overnight bag into his truck. "Take good care of Mom while I'm gone," he told Sarah, squeezing her hand affectionately. "Of course," Sarah replied with her practiced smile. "We'll be just fine." The moment David's truck disappeared around the corner, Sarah's entire demeanor transformed like someone had flipped a switch. The caring mask vanished completely, replaced by cold hostility that made the kitchen feel dangerous. "Finally," Sarah said, turning toward me with undisguised contempt. "Now we can have an honest conversation." I was sitting at the kitchen table with my morning coffee, my crutches leaning against the chair beside me. The cast on my leg felt heavy and awkward, but my mind was clear since I'd stopped taking Sarah's tampered medications several days earlier. "What do you mean?" I asked, though I suspected this confrontation had been building for weeks. Sarah pulled out the chair across from me and sat down with deliberate slowness. "I mean, it's time to stop pretending, Faye. This whole helpless injured woman act is getting old." "Act?" The word came out sharper than I intended. "Sarah, I have a broken leg in 2 places. There are X-rays and surgical reports." She laughed, a sound devoid of any warmth. "Oh, please. You're milking this injury for every ounce of sympathy and attention you can get. Poor little old lady who needs constant care and can't be left alone." The accusation hit me like a physical blow. "That's completely untrue. I never asked for any of this." "Really?" Sarah leaned forward, her eyes glittering with malice. "Then why are you fighting so hard against the idea of assisted living? Why won't you make things easier for everyone and just go somewhere you can get proper care?" Now I understood what this was really about. Sarah wanted me out of the house entirely so she could have complete access to David's income and my financial resources without my interference. "Because I don't need assisted living," I said firmly. "I need time to recover from surgery, which is completely normal." Sarah's composure cracked, revealing the rage underneath. "You're 70 years old and becoming a burden on everyone around you. David works 10-hour days and then comes home to worry about whether you've fallen again or forgotten to eat. You're ruining our lives." "I'm 67, not 70, I corrected automatically, "and I've never forgotten to eat. You're the one who's been withholding meals and giving me incorrect medications." The moment those words left my mouth, I knew I'd made a mistake. Sarah's face went white, then flushed with fury. "How dare you accuse me of that?" she hissed. "I've been nothing but devoted to your care, sacrificing my own time and energy to help you." I stood up slowly, reaching for my crutches. "I know what you've been doing, Sarah. I know about the gambling debts, the research about having me declared incompetent, and the way you've been poisoning David against me." Sarah shot to her feet so quickly her chair scraped against the floor. "You don't know anything, you paranoid old woman. You're confused and delusional, which is exactly what I'll tell David when he gets back." "I'm calling David right now," I said, attempting to move toward the phone mounted on the kitchen wall. But Sarah stepped into my path, blocking my access to the telephone. "No, you're not." When I tried to retrieve my cell phone from my purse on the counter, Sarah was faster. She grabbed the device and, before I could stop her, hurled it against the kitchen wall. The phone exploded into pieces, plastic and glass scattering across the floor. "There," she said with satisfaction. "No more calling David to fill his head with your crazy stories." I stared at the destroyed phone, feeling genuine fear creeping up my spine. Sarah had crossed a line into open hostility and destructive behavior. If she was willing to destroy my property, what else might she be capable of? "You can't keep me from talking to my son," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Sarah laughed again, but the sound was entirely unhinged. "Watch me. David thinks you're losing your mind. And after I tell him about this latest episode, he'll be ready to sign whatever papers are necessary to get you the help you so desperately need." I realized she was referring to commitment papers or guardianship documents. Sarah had been building toward this moment for months, systematically destroying my credibility and independence. You won't get away with this, I said, reaching for my crutches to move toward the landline phone in the living room. But Sarah stepped closer, her face twisted with rage. You want to know what I think? I think you're faking half of this injury for attention. Poor little Faye. Needs everyone to feel sorry for her and take care of her. That's not true, and you know it. Prove it, Sarah snarled. If your leg is really that badly injured, you shouldn't be able to stand on it at all. Before I could react, Sarah reached down and kicked one of my crutches, sending it sliding across the kitchen floor. I struggled to maintain my balance, putting weight on my injured leg that sent sharp pain shooting through my body. Sarah, stop it, I gasped. But something had snapped inside her completely. She kicked my remaining crutch away, leaving me swaying unsteadily without support. There's the truth, she said with cruel satisfaction. Look how well you can balance when you're not putting on a show. I tried to hop toward the kitchen counter to grab something for support, but Sarah stepped directly in front of me. You're not going anywhere until we settle this once and for all. What are you talking about? Sarah's eyes were wild now, filled with a rage that made her look like a stranger. I know you've been writing things down, documenting things you think I've done wrong. Where is it? She was talking about my hidden journal. Somehow she'd figured out I'd been keeping records of her abuse and manipulation. I don't know what you mean, I lied, though my heart was pounding. Don't lie to me, Sarah screamed. I've searched your room twice and I know you're hiding something. Where is your little diary full of lies about me? When I didn't answer, she shoved me hard in the shoulder. Without my crutches for balance, I stumbled backward, pain flaring through my injured leg as I fought to stay upright. Tell me where it is, Sarah demanded, shoving me again. This time, I couldn't maintain my balance. I fell hard against the kitchen island, then slumped to the cold tile floor, my legs screaming in agony as I landed awkwardly on the cast. Sarah stood over me, breathing hard, her face flushed with exertion and fury. For a moment we stared at each other in shock. She had actually pushed me down, crossed the line from psychological abuse into physical violence. Look what you made me do, she said, but her voice carried no remorse, only anger that I'd forced her hand. As I lay on the floor looking up at this woman my son had married, I realized Sarah was capable of far worse than I'd imagined. The little red light in the corner of the room caught my eye, and I prayed that the security camera David had installed was capturing every moment of this encounter, because I knew this wasn't over. This was just the beginning. Sarah stared down at me, sprawled across the kitchen floor, her chest rising and falling rapidly from the adrenaline of what she'd just done. For a split second, I saw uncertainty flicker across her face, as if she couldn't quite believe she'd actually pushed me down. This is your fault, she said, her voice shaking slightly. You pushed me to this point with your stubborn refusal to cooperate. I tried to push myself up from the cold tile, but the pain in my leg was excruciating. The fall had definitely aggravated my injuries, and I could feel something warm and wet seeping through my cast. Sarah, I need help, I gasped. I think I'm bleeding. She looked at the darkening stain on my cast, with what appeared to be calculation rather than concern. You should have thought about that before you started making wild accusations about me. Please, I whispered, just help me get to a chair. Instead, Sarah crouched down next to me, her face inches from mine. Her voice dropped to a whisper that was somehow more terrifying than her earlier screaming. Here's what's going to happen, Faye. I'm going to call 911 and tell them I found you after another fall. You're going to confirm that you slipped and fell on your own because you were trying to do too much too soon. And when David gets back, you're going to agree that you need professional care in a facility where people can watch you 24 hours a day. I won't lie for you, I said through gritted teeth. Sarah's expression hardened. Yes, you will. Because if you don't, I'll make sure your next accident is much worse than this one. Do you understand me? The threat was clear and chilling. Sarah was telling me that if I didn't cooperate with her plan, she would hurt me again, possibly seriously enough to permanently disable me, or worse. You're threatening me, I said, wanting her words on record if the security camera was indeed recording. I'm promising you, Sarah replied coldly. One way or another, you're going to stop being a problem in my marriage. She stood up and walked to the phone, dialing 911 with steady fingers. When the dispatcher answered, Sarah's voice transformed back into that of a concerned caregiver. This is Sarah Morrison at 1423 Maple Street. My elderly mother-in-law has fallen in the kitchen, and I think she's seriously injured. Please send an ambulance. The performance was flawless. Sarah answered the dispatcher's questions with apparent distress, explaining that she'd been upstairs when she heard a crash and found me on the floor. She mentioned my recent surgery and ongoing recovery, painting a picture of an elderly woman whose mobility issues had led to another unfortunate accident. The paramedics arrived within 8 minutes, the same emergency crew that had responded to my initial fall months earlier. Sarah met them at the door with red-rimmed eyes and a trembling voice, as if she'd been crying with worry. "I just found her like this," Sarah told them, as they examined me on the kitchen floor. "I was putting laundry away upstairs when I heard the noise. She must have been trying to reach something and lost her balance." The lead paramedic, a kind man named Tom, recognized me from my previous injury. "Hello again, Mrs. Morrison. Can you tell me what happened?" I looked up at him, then at Sarah standing behind him with her arms crossed and her eyes boring into me. The unspoken threat hung in the air between us. "I fell," I said quietly. The ambulance ride to the hospital felt like the longest 20 minutes of my life. Sarah held my hand and murmured comforting words while the paramedics worked to stabilize me, but all I could think about was her threat and what might happen if I tried to tell the truth. At the emergency room, Dr. Walsh examined my injuries with obvious concern. The fall had reopened part of my surgical site and caused additional fracturing around the pins in my leg. Internal bleeding was evident, and my blood pressure was dangerously low. "We need to get her into surgery immediately," Dr. Walsh told David when he arrived at the hospital after driving straight through from Indiana. His face was pale with worry and exhaustion from the emergency drive home. "How did this happen?" David asked Sarah as they waited outside the operating room. Sarah's story was consistent and convincing. I think she was trying to prove she could manage more than she actually can. You know how independent she's always been. "I found her on the kitchen floor after hearing the crash from upstairs." David nodded grimly. "We might need to seriously consider assisted living. She obviously needs more supervision than we can provide." "I've been thinking the same thing," Sarah agreed. "I hate to say it, but I don't think she's safe living with us anymore." During my 3-week hospital stay following the second surgery, I had time to think and plan. The nursing staff was compassionate and attentive, particularly a nurse named Linda Carter who seemed to notice things others missed. "How are you feeling about going home?" Nurse Carter asked one afternoon while checking my vital signs. "Scared," I admitted before I could stop myself. She paused in her work and looked at me with genuine concern. "Scared about your recovery? The physical therapy?" I hesitated, knowing how crazy my story would sound. But something in Nurse Carter's eyes made me feel safe enough to trust her. "Scared about my daughter-in-law?" I said quietly. Nurse Carter glanced toward the door, then moved closer to my bed. "Can you tell me why?" The whole story poured out of me then. Sarah's manipulation, the financial abuse, the medication tampering, the threats, and finally the assault that had landed me back in the hospital. Nurse Carter listened without interruption, occasionally taking notes in a small notebook. "These are very serious allegations," she said when I finished. "Have you documented any of this?" I told her about my hidden journal and the security camera that might have recorded Sarah's assault. Nurse Carter's expression grew more concerned with each detail I shared. "I think you need to speak with someone who specializes in elder abuse cases," she said. "Would you be willing to meet with an attorney who could advise you about your options?" 2 days later, Attorney James Brennan visited me in the hospital. He was a tall man in his 50s with silver hair and an air of quiet competence. Nurse Carter had explained my situation to him, and he came prepared with questions and legal guidance. "Mrs. Morrison," he said, settling into the chair beside my bed, "Linda tells me you've been experiencing abuse in your home. I'd like to hear your story and discuss what evidence might be available to support your claims." I told him everything, from Sarah's initial manipulation to the physical assault that had put me back in the hospital. Attorney Brennan took detailed notes and asked specific questions about dates, witnesses, and documentation. "The security camera footage would be crucial evidence," he said. "Is your son willing to provide access to the system?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Sarah has convinced him that I'm having mental episodes. He might not believe me." Attorney Brennan leaned forward. "Then we'll need to approach this carefully. I'd like to contact your son and request a meeting to discuss your care arrangements." If Sarah believes this is about placing you in assisted living, she'll likely agree to the meeting. That would give us an opportunity to present the evidence without warning her in advance. During our conversation, Attorney Brennan also ran a background check on Sarah that revealed information David had never known. She had a previous arrest for financial fraud in another state and a history of debt problems that she'd hidden from my son. This pattern of behavior suggests your daughter-in-law may have targeted your son specifically because of his stable income and your presence in the home, Attorney Brennan explained. Elder financial abuse often involves family members or caregivers who have access to victims' assets and living situations. As my discharge date approached, I felt a mixture of hope and terror. I would finally have professional help in exposing Sarah's abuse, but I also had to return to a house where she had threatened my safety. We'll have evidence and legal support, Attorney Brennan assured me, and I'll make sure appropriate protections are in place before any confrontation occurs. The day I left the hospital, David and Sarah arrived to take me home. Sarah's performance of loving concern continued flawlessly as she helped me into their car and fussed over my comfort during the drive. "I'm so glad you're finally coming home," she said, squeezing my hand. "I've missed taking care of you." But when she looked at me, her eyes held a cold warning that reminded me of her threats in the kitchen. Sarah believed she had successfully covered her tracks and isolated me from any help or support. She had no idea that everything was about to change. I returned home to find that David had arranged for round-the-clock nursing care during my recovery. A gentle woman named Margaret would be staying with us for the first week to ensure I received proper medical attention and physical therapy support. Sarah accepted this arrangement with apparent grace, though I caught flashes of irritation when she thought no one was looking. Having a nurse present meant she couldn't continue her abuse or manipulation without witnesses, which clearly frustrated her plans. "Whatever you need to feel comfortable, Mom," David told me, as he helped me settle into the living room recliner. "Sarah and I just want you to recover fully." Attorney Brennan had arranged to meet with our family 2 days after my return home, ostensibly to discuss care arrangements and legal planning for the future. When David mentioned the upcoming meeting to Sarah, she showed immediate interest. "That sounds very sensible," she said. "It's important to have everything properly documented, especially given Mom's recent confusion and multiple accidents." Sarah clearly believed this meeting would advance her agenda of having me declared incompetent or placed in institutional care. She spent the intervening days organizing papers and preparing what appeared to be a presentation about my supposed mental decline. On the morning of the meeting, Attorney Brennan arrived at our home carrying a laptop computer and a briefcase full of documents. David had set up chairs around the dining room table, and Sarah had prepared coffee and pastries as if hosting a social gathering. "Thank you all for taking the time to meet with me," Attorney Brennan began formally. "As families navigate caregiving challenges, it's important to ensure everyone's needs and rights are protected." Sarah leaned forward eagerly. "We're so grateful for your expertise. David and I have been struggling with some difficult decisions about Mom's care, and we need professional guidance." "I'd like to hear your perspective on the current situation," Attorney Brennan said, taking out a legal pad. "What concerns do you have about Mrs. Morrison's well-being?" Sarah launched into her carefully prepared presentation. She described my supposed confusion, memory problems, and inability to manage my own basic needs. From a manila folder, she produced printed screenshots from videos she'd secretly recorded on her phone. These show Mom during her episodes of disorientation. Sarah explained to David and Attorney Brennan. "As you can see, she becomes very confused and sometimes can't remember basic information." David watched the videos with obvious pain and concern. In each clip, I appeared disoriented and struggled to answer Sarah's questions coherently. To anyone who didn't know about the medication tampering, the footage looked like clear evidence of cognitive decline. "These episodes have become more frequent since her surgery," Sarah continued. "I'm concerned she may have early-stage dementia that's being exacerbated by the stress and pain of her injuries." Attorney Brennan studied the videos carefully, asking detailed questions about when they were recorded and under what circumstances. Sarah answered confidently, clearly believing her evidence was compelling and legally sufficient. "Based on what you've shown me," Attorney Brennan said, "these are indeed concerning behaviors that would warrant professional evaluation and possibly increase supervision." Sarah's face brightened with satisfaction. Exactly. David and I love Mom dearly, but we're not qualified to provide the level of care she needs. We think residential placement might be the kindest option for everyone involved. That's an understandably difficult decision, Attorney Brennan said sympathetically. However, before we discuss care options, I have some additional footage I'd like everyone to review. Sarah's confident expression faltered slightly. Additional footage? Security camera recordings from your home system, Attorney Brennan replied, opening his laptop computer. Your son provided me with access to review any incidents that might be relevant to Mrs. Morrison's care needs. David nodded. I thought it would be helpful to see if Mom's falls were captured on camera, so we could understand what safety modifications might be needed. Sarah's face went completely white. I don't think that's necessary. We already know what happened during her accidents. Nevertheless, Attorney Brennan said, clicking on a video file, I think this footage might provide valuable context for our discussion. The laptop screen filled with a clear view of our kitchen, time-stamped with the date and time of Sarah's assault against me. Sarah's hands began trembling as she recognized what was about to be revealed. Perhaps we should skip this, she said quickly. I'm sure it's upsetting for everyone to relive Mom's accidents. But Attorney Brennan was already pressing play. The room fell silent as we watched Sarah kick away my crutches and shove me to the floor while screaming accusations about faking my injuries. David's sharp intake of breath was audible as his wife's true nature played out on the screen. Sarah's cruel words and threats were captured with perfect clarity, along with her callous indifference to my pain and pleas for help. This footage was recorded on the day of Mrs. Morrison's second fall, Attorney Brennan explained calmly while the video continued. As you can see, the incident was not accidental. Sarah jumped up from her chair, her face flushed with panic. That video is taken out of context. You don't understand the stress I've been under, trying to care for someone who won't cooperate with treatment. Sarah, David whispered, his voice filled with horror and disbelief. How could you do this to my mother? She was being impossible, Sarah said desperately. Refusing to take her medications properly, making wild accusations about me, threatening to cause problems between us. I just lost my temper for a moment. Attorney Brennan clicked on another video file. This is footage from 3 weeks earlier, showing Mrs. Morrison appearing confused during one of the episodes you documented. This video showed Sarah giving me pills that were clearly different from my prescribed medications, then filming me 20 minutes later when I was disoriented and struggling to answer basic questions. You were drugging her, David said, the pieces finally coming together in his mind. You were deliberately giving her the wrong medications to make her seem confused. Sarah's carefully constructed facade was crumbling completely. David, you have to understand, I was trying to help. Your mother was becoming dangerous to herself and others. Someone needed to make the difficult decisions about her care. By abusing her? David stood up, backing away from his wife as if seeing her for the first time. By poisoning her and then physically assaulting her? Attorney Brennan continued clicking through additional video files. We have extensive footage of medication tampering, verbal abuse, and deliberate isolation. Mrs. Morrison has also been documenting these incidents in a journal that corroborates the video evidence. Sarah's panic was escalating into hysteria. You don't understand what it's been like living with her, dealing with her every day. The constant demands, the suspicion, the way she tries to turn you against me. She never turned me against you, David said, his voice breaking. You did that yourself with your lies and abuse. In her desperation, Sarah made one final attempt to deflect blame. There are things you don't know, David. Things about how I've been trying to protect this family from financial ruin. Attorney Brennan raised an eyebrow. What kind of financial ruin? Sarah seemed to realize she'd revealed too much, but the words kept pouring out in her panic. The gambling debts, the credit cards, the loans I had to take out to keep us afloat. Your mother's money could have solved everything, but she was too selfish to help her own family. Gambling debts? David repeated, staring at his wife with growing comprehension. I was trying to win money for us, Sarah said frantically. The online poker was supposed to be temporary, just until I could get ahead, but I needed access to larger amounts of capital to make it work. Attorney Brennan leaned forward with interest. Are you saying you plan to use Mrs. Morrison's finances to fund gambling activities? Sarah realized her confession was only making things worse, but she seemed unable to stop talking. It wasn't just gambling. I've been helping elderly patients at the dental clinic manage their pain medications. Some of them don't need their full prescriptions, so I've been redistributing the excess to people who really need them. David sat down heavily, looking nauseated. You've been stealing medications from elderly patients? Not stealing, Sarah protested. Redistributing, and selling them to people who can't afford prescription prices through legitimate channels. The room fell silent, except for Sarah's labored breathing, as the full scope of her criminal activity became clear. She hadn't just been abusing me. She had been systematically exploiting elderly patients at her workplace, stealing their pain medications and selling them illegally. Attorney Brennan closed his laptop and looked directly at Sarah. I think we have enough information for now. I'll be contacting law enforcement to report these crimes and providing them with all the evidence we've gathered. Sarah's face crumpled as she realized the magnitude of what she'd confessed. Please, you don't understand. I never meant for any of this to happen. I just got in over my head and made some bad decisions. But David was already pulling out his phone. I'm calling the police myself, he said quietly, and then I'm calling a divorce attorney. As Sarah collapsed into her chair, sobbing and begging for forgiveness that would never come, I felt a complex mixture of relief, sadness, and vindication. The nightmare was finally over, but the cost to our family had been enormous. Justice was coming, but healing would take much longer. The police arrived within 30 minutes of David's call, led by Detective Maria Santos, who specialized in elder abuse cases. Attorney Brennan had prepared copies of all the video evidence, my journal documentation, and Sarah's recorded confession from our meeting. Sarah was arrested that afternoon on charges of elder abuse, assault, medication theft, drug trafficking, and financial fraud. As the handcuffs clicked around her wrists, she looked at David with desperate pleading in her eyes. This will destroy both of us, she said. Think about what this will do to your reputation, your career. We can work this out privately. David turned away without responding. The man who had loved and trusted her was gone, replaced by someone who finally saw her true nature clearly. Within days, the investigation expanded beyond our family. Detective Santos contacted the dental practice where Sarah worked, and a comprehensive audit revealed that she had been systematically stealing pain medications from 12 elderly patients over the course of 18 months. Mrs. Eleanor Rodriguez, an 83-year-old woman recovering from oral surgery, had been receiving only half of her prescribed pain medication, while Sarah diverted the rest for illegal sale. Mr. Frank Chen, a 79-year-old man with chronic dental problems, had suffered unnecessarily during procedures because Sarah had been replacing his anxiety medication with sugar pills. Each victim's story broke my heart. These were vulnerable people who had trusted Sarah with their medical care, just as I had trusted her with my recovery, and David had trusted her with his love. The legal proceedings moved swiftly. Sarah's attorney attempted to negotiate a plea deal, but the evidence against her was overwhelming. The security footage, victim testimonies, medical records showing medication discrepancies, and her own recorded confession created an airtight case. During this time, David struggled profoundly with guilt and self-recrimination. How did I not see this? He asked me repeatedly. How did I let her hurt you for so long without noticing? She's a master manipulator, I told him gently. She targeted both of us very deliberately, and she almost succeeded. The important thing is that the truth came out before she could hurt more people. David filed for divorce immediately and obtained restraining orders to prevent Sarah from contacting either of us or accessing any shared financial accounts. He also entered counseling to process the trauma of discovering his wife's true nature and learn how to recognize manipulation tactics in the future. 6 months after her arrest, Sarah pleaded guilty to all charges in exchange for a sentence of 5 years in state prison, followed by 3 years of supervised probation. The plea agreement also required her to pay restitution to all her victims and surrender her dental hygiene license permanently. The day of her sentencing, I attended the court hearing along with several other victims from the dental practice. Sarah's appearance had changed dramatically during her time in jail. Gone was the polished, manipulative woman who had charmed her way into our family. In her place sat someone who looked broken and defeated. When given the opportunity to address her victims, Sarah stood and spoke in a barely audible voice. "I know my apologies can't undo the harm I've caused to Mrs. Morrison and the other people I hurt. I was drowning in debt and addiction, but that's no excuse for the pain I inflicted on vulnerable people who trusted me." Her words seemed genuine, but trust was no longer something I could afford to give easily. My physical recovery progressed steadily once I received proper medical care and medications. Physical therapy helped restore my strength and mobility, though I would always walk with a slight limp as a reminder of what had happened. More importantly, I used part of the substantial settlement I received from Sarah's professional liability insurance to establish the Morrison Elder Safety Foundation, which provides education about recognizing and preventing elder abuse in families and care facilities. David and I found a comfortable apartment where we could live together safely, with separate spaces for independence and shared areas for family time. Our relationship had to be rebuilt from the foundation up, but it emerged stronger and more honest than before. "I promise I'll never dismiss your concerns again," David told me during one of our evening talks. "I should have listened when you tried to tell me what was happening." "We both learned valuable lessons," I replied. "Sometimes the people who seem most trustworthy are the ones we need to watch most carefully." 1 year after Sarah's sentencing, I began speaking at community centers and senior living facilities about my experience. These presentations weren't easy, but they were necessary. Too many elderly people suffer in silence because they're afraid no one will believe them or because they've been isolated from potential sources of help. During these talks, I always emphasized several key points. Document everything, trust your instincts, maintain connections with multiple people outside your household, and never hesitate to seek professional help if something feels wrong. The most rewarding part of my advocacy work came when other victims reached out for support and guidance. A 74-year-old woman named Grace called me after one of my presentations to report that her nephew was stealing her Social Security checks. An 80-year-old man named Robert contacted me because his caregiver was threatening him with abandonment if he didn't sign over his property deed. Each person I was able to help reinforced my conviction that surviving trauma can become a source of strength and purpose. David eventually met someone new, a kindergarten teacher named Amanda, who treated both him and me with genuine kindness and respect. Their relationship developed slowly and carefully, with both of them committed to building something based on honesty and communication rather than illusion and manipulation. "I like how she asks about your day and actually listens to your answers," I told David, after Amanda had been coming around for several months. "She reminds me of you, actually," he replied. "Strong, independent, but warm and caring. I think that's why I trust her." 3 years after my ordeal ended, I received an unexpected letter from Sarah in prison. She was participating in addiction counseling and therapy programs, working toward rehabilitation and eventual reintegration into society. "I think about the harm I caused every day," she wrote. "Not just the physical injuries, but the way I destroyed your sense of safety in your own family. I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I'm working to become someone who would never hurt another person the way I hurt you." I chose not to respond to her letter, but I didn't throw it away either. Forgiveness was a process I was still working through, and I wasn't ready to engage with her directly. Perhaps someday I would be, but that day hadn't come yet. What mattered most was that I had reclaimed my life, my independence, and my sense of purpose. The foundation I established had helped more than 200 families recognize and escape elder abuse situations. David and I had rebuilt our relationship on a foundation of mutual respect and open communication. Most importantly, I had learned that speaking up for yourself, even when others don't initially believe you, is always the right choice. Documenting abuse and seeking help from professionals can save not just yourself, but other potential victims who might suffer if predators aren't stopped. My ordeal taught me that surviving trauma doesn't make you weak or damaged. It can make you stronger, wiser, and more determined to protect others from similar harm. Justice may sometimes move slowly, but it will prevail when good people refuse to stay silent in the face of cruelty and deception. The little red light on that security camera had captured more than just evidence of a crime. It had recorded the moment when I stopped being a victim and started becoming a survivor. And that transformation had made all the difference, not just for me, but for everyone whose life I've been able to touch since then. I want to ask you something important. Have you ever noticed signs that an elderly person in your life might be experiencing abuse or manipulation? Maybe subtle changes in their behavior, unexplained injuries, or a caregiver who seems overly controlling? Your awareness and willingness to speak up could literally save someone's life. Please share this story with others who might benefit from recognizing these warning signs. Like this video if it opened your eyes to the reality of elder abuse. Subscribe to hear more stories of survivors who found the courage to fight back. And comment below about how we can better protect the vulnerable people in our communities. Thank you for listening to my story and caring enough to help spread awareness about this crucial issue. I hope that by sharing what happened to me, we can prevent it from happening to others. Stay strong, stay vigilant, and remember that it's never too late to seek help or stand up for what's right.